We're here this afternoon with Ernest Poore, and he's agreed to let us interview him about his experiences in World War II. And Ernest, I really want to thank you for that. And I can sense you have some interesting things to say, so I'm kind of looking forward to this. So, pretty much going to let you just start out wherever you'd like to.
All right.
And then, if you'd like to start with a little bit before the war, what you were doing and how you wound up getting into the service, that'd be great. Or just wherever you feel like beginning is fine. So.
Well, I graduated in 1933 from high school, and I stayed with my parents 7 years on the farm. And it was during the bottom of the Depression. And I did not see any future in farming. I was raising a lot of poultry and livestock, and we had a large 240-acre farm, but it was no future, and I got discouraged and decided to enlist in the Air Force. So on the 22nd of February, 1941, I enlisted at Chanute Field at Rantoul, Illinois. And I went down there and was there just several weeks, and I got pneumonia first, and then I went into the hospital, and the guy next to me in the bunk bay there, he came down with mumps, and then I got them, and I was real sick then, so I went through a very trying time, and they decided to send me home for a 30-day furlough. Then after that, to the farm, and I was the thinnest I've ever been in my life. But anyway, I recovered, and they decided to put me into a mess squadron when I came back, preparing food, you see, and so I went back and had, like I say, my choice of good food. It was good Army chow.
There is such a thing.
Yeah, okay. It is. There is, and it was good. And I was there a while, and then they decided they were going to send our mess squadron to down to Texas at Wichita Falls at the base there. It was, I'll think of it in a second. It's funny how it gets away from you. But anyway, I was there a while and saw it built. We were in tents in the beginning. They didn't even have our barracks built, and let alone, and then they had to build the mess halls and all that, But anyway, then it came around that they wanted volunteers to go to pastry school. So I volunteered. I wanted to do something more special and just being a kind of a roustabout in the mess hall, and so I went down to Fort Sam Houston at that's oh man, it's funny how I forget those towns.
That's okay. It's all right.
But San Antonio.
Okay.
That's where it is.
Sure.
And Wichita Falls is where my base was in central Texas is where it was. And I was taking my course, and then one Sunday morning, or in the forenoon, why they announced Pearl Harbor was bombed. So I finished my course and I went back to Wichita Falls and went into the mess halls, various ones, because they had 14 of them built then, and I was kind of troubleshooter for a while, helping the cooks do the baking, and because they had problems with their poor setup, for baking, really.
I suppose.
Yes, and so I just went from one mess hall to another to try and correct their problems for a while. And then we got the centralized bake shop built, and I and another sergeant, we operated that centralized bake shop for the whole base then, and baked for the whole base. And we did this for close to 3 years. And then the Battle of the Bulge, the last German drive came about, and we lost a lot of men in that pinchers movement that the Germans set up during the winter of that, and that was, I think it was 1944, I believe it was.
That's what I was going to guess.
Yes, and but anyway, they got me out of bed at 10:30 at night, and they said, "You be on a troop train for training for the Air Force, active gunnery training." So they sent me to Harlingen, Texas, for gunnery training, and there was a whole bunch of us trained there, and for various positions in the planes, and I happened to be chosen as an upper Martin turret gunner, and that position is right back at the co-pilot and pilot, and I had control of the top of the airplane, and my turret would revolve completely around, and I had 250 caliber machine guns each side of my head, and when they'd come around to the wingtips, they were synchronized so that they would shut off, so they wouldn't shoot the tips of the wings.
Probably a good plan.
It was very good, and I always hoped they worked. And but after all that training, then they sent us to Florida, and for just future replacements. That's what we all were. But it seemed like very few of us were ever called to go overseas. So I went right back into pastry baking again, and I was baking 2 items a day for an officer's cafeteria there, and with another sergeant, and the 2 of us worked together as a team there. And while I was there, I had extra time too, and so I took Air Force extension courses from Madison, Wisconsin, and one of them was bookkeeping 1 and 2, and so they decided they needed a bookkeeper for this officer's cafeteria, so they hired me to keep their records besides my other duty, and so that was my first experience of working at accounting for anyone. And it was, and then I was discharged, I think it was the 29th of November in 1945 then. And I was discharged at Wichita Falls at Shepherd Field at that time, and came back here to Minnesota and was enlisted as a reserve in case they ever needed me, but never did. But then I went into school, accounting school, and Minnesota School of Business for accounting, and I took a course there for it was about a year and 3/4 years. I studied accounting there and auditing and things like that, and then my first working position was for Land O'Lakes Creameries at Lakefield, Minnesota. So I went down there and run a branch office that they had down there it was a feed and fertilizer and a small turkey dressing plant, and it was mainly service to farmers, various services, and it's a very good agricultural area down there. And then in 1949, there was a position offered to me up here in Perham. And so we decided that was time. We wanted to get near a hospital. Our firstborn was, and we didn't have a hospital in Lakefield.
Okay.
And and my wife's parents lived here, so that was very attractive.
Good package deal, kind
yes,
of.
Yes, you bet.
All right.
So we came up here in 1949 and settled down, and we raised 5 children, all born here in the Perham Hospital, and there was 2 sons and 3 daughters. 3 daughters in between the 2 sons.
Okay.
And we've enjoyed a very productive, rich life here in Perham. And I was in business for 10 years myself, in produce business. And the rest of the time I did accounting. And first it was Perham Produce Company, and then later on it was the Feed Producers Association.
Okay.
And after that it was Young's Jobbing Company. I was their accountant for a number of years until the manager passed away.
Okay.
Albert Rada, the manager. And then I worked a while for the potato farm, and then there was a break in between. I was out of work just a short while, but I had employment for Minnesota. It was state of Minnesota there for income tax preparation and auditing.
Sure.
It was sales tax returns.
Okay. I'm going to steer us back, if it's okay with you now, back to some of the war period and stuff like that.
All right.
And then we can kind of cover some other things too as we go along. That's fine.
Certainly.
I remember you mentioned something about that there were 14 mess halls in the one place that you first were working in.
Yes, that's right.
Why 14 different ones? Simply because one or two large ones would be too unmanageable, or different classes, different officers versus whatever?
Shepherd Field was a training base for glider pilots and mechanics and other types of training too that I really didn't know much about, because and the reason there was a lot of barracks there, and they were spread out a lot, 2-story barracks, and and there was one area for the black soldiers, and then there was another area for the female. I forget the wax, I believe.
Wax or something like that?
Yes, I believe it was.
Uh-huh.
And they, of course, they worked mainly in the hospital and service around. I don't think there were too many of them training for. I mean, educators of the men, really. I think it was mainly hospital duties that they had. And I know it's a completely different base now. They rebuilt it and made brick buildings, a lot of brick buildings there. I went back there later on, and I didn't hardly recognize the place. All the wooden buildings seem to be gone.
I suppose.
Yes, they made a permanent base. And it was, and in the beginning when I came there, they were building the runways and putting in the streets, and when it rained, it was just a terrible mess. You could
I can imagine.
It was just slippery, that yellow clay. Boy, it was really messy.
Well, in a way, you were a pioneer on that base, if you stop
yes.
to think of it. Kind of like on the Old West, you know,
That's right.
The streets were all mucky and stuff, and nowadays you go out there and it's all, you know, like the base is now, probably. So.
Well, when we came there, we were in Tent City in an old base where World War I had been. And that was quite a ways away from this new base. And we had cold showers, and there was little tiny creatures there that they were about 6-8 inches long.
Oh, the little lizards.
Lizards,
yeah. The little quicks, they call them, or the
and
geckos.
They dashed through the grass, you know, and we enjoyed catching them if we could.
Yeah. Now, didn't they drop their tails off when you caught them?
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, they'd drop them right off.
Yeah. Clever little things, aren't they?
Yeah, they were cute, but boy, they didn't want to be handled, I tell you. So we were really pioneers because we helped open that base up, you see, from the very beginning. And that's right. And
now you mentioned that there was a barracks or area for the black men, the black service personnel. At that time, I must assume that there was quite a bit of discrimination and segregation. Were they treated differently, or was there much, friendship between the fellas? Or
I don't believe there was much friendship on the base at that time, but I'm sure overseas, these units. They knew they had to cooperate and mingle together, because each one supported the other. And so fellowship got very thick over there, I mean, in active combat.
Yeah, when your life and the other person's life are,
That's right, because you're depending on each other very much.
Right.
I never got into active combat that way,
right.
And so I never had that feeling. But my feeling towards the black race is very much different now than it was then. I know that.
Sure.
Yes. And,
well, good for you for growing.
Yes.
You know.
Well, my faith is one reason that it changed so much, because I feel that all men are the children of God, and so that there shouldn't be any race discrimination ever.
Thank you. Yes. Right.
That's right.
Couldn't agree more strongly.
Yes. I think that the Lord put us here for a certain purpose, and that we shouldn't, that we have no right to judge any person or any anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't put too much of my own thoughts and feelings in here, but I could only wish that more people felt that way. So.
It would be a much more peaceful world if we could have tolerance for each other.
World War II perhaps may never have happened if there were more of that.
That's right.
So.
Just look at how terrible it was,
yes.
and for what came out of it, you know, the Holocaust and all that.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You mentioned that there was a centralized bake shop that you and another man ran for about 3 years, you say?
Yes.
Now, was that, you mentioned you used to go around and troubleshoot to the different mess halls. Once they did the centralized bake shop, did they do away with the individual baking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we baked for the whole base then, and they just distributed it to all the mess halls.
Sure. Okay.
From the centralized shop. And so I had 2 60-gallon size Holbert mixers that I operated, and 1 25-gallon.
Gallon.
Yes. Yeah. It took 2 men to handle.
I was going to say,
60 gallons.
Show us with your arms roughly what a 60-gallon tub of stuff looked like, roughly.
Well, it's a bowl. I would say that it's about like this, and comes up here, you know.
All right.
And it has 2 big handles on each side, you know.
Yes. All right.
And then the mixer the tongs, you know.
Yes. Yes.
It could mix. They had tongs for bread, and then they had mixing paddles,
different
you know,
ones
for batter, and
right.
And then the 25-gallon size was for icing, and mainly the smaller amounts. But so we handled an awful volume of food.
It sure sounds like it.
And we baked rolls and cakes and pies and donuts and cookies.
I bet you guys were kind of popular.
Oh, we never knew.
Okay.
I tell you, there was from 14 to 18,000 men on that base. I was told later. I had no idea how many there were when we were working there, and but that's what they told me when I went back there and later to see the base, and it was permanent base, and that was 15 years later or 20.
Yeah.
And
that's a lot of men to be baking for.
yes, it was.
I mean, that's a city, or not, but a small a town at least.
Sure,
yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
But anyway, that was my main contribution, and then baking for the second lieutenants. They were co-pilots that were being prepared to go overseas, you know, and it was mainly co-pilots on that small base, and so they outnumbered the enlisted men quite a lot. Yeah. So,
now, did they get better baked goods than the enlisted men did?
I don't think it got any better.
Oh.
We tried our best to feed them the same, you know, and
well, I know on your part you would make all the quality the same,
yeah.
I'm sure, but I just meant as far as the distribution. Then, did they get more cakes and pies or anything like that?
Well, they did get 2 items a day.
Okay.
6 days a week.
Uh-huh.
And,
Okay.
Yes, that's right. It was always a challenge, you know, to keep rotating items, you know, and so that they wouldn't their taste would enjoy the different variety, you know.
Yeah, you don't want carrot cake for 8 days in a row.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's right. We had to have quite a variety, of course, and rotate it all the time, and it was hard work, but it was interesting too, and I always felt blessed that I got into that I enlisted and got into that department before the actual fighting, because after having pneumonia and mumps, I decided I had to take care of my health, and I recovered wonderful that way by working. We worked at nights mainly, and when it was much cooler and a lot nicer for baking.
I just happen to think you're in Texas and you're in Florida and you're baking.
Yes, that's could be a very hot proposition that.
And I'm guessing they didn't have much for air conditioning in those days.
No, they didn't. That was something we didn't know a thing about. No.
Wow. So yeah, nighttime would make sense.
Oh yes, it was great, and yeah, and the cooks they would select some good meat cuts, and fix them for us, and about midnight where we'd have a banquet.
So there were some perks going on. Huh?
Oh yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that's right. It was wonderful. It was, yeah. I was always glad that I enlisted. I never regretted it a bit, and
it served you well
yes,
to have gotten
it did.
established in
that's
that.
Right.
Yes, that's for sure.
And and my other two brothers, they went in active training and went overseas quick, and one in the Air Force and one in the medics, and they both survived, and
both returned.
And yes, and they're still, they
well, and they're still living now then.
Well, my youngest brother passed away of leukemia just the last of July.
I remember talking with you about that.
Last of June it was. Yes, 29th of June.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, and but my other brother, he lives at Kenai, Alaska, and his health is not as good as mine, but he's surviving.
You sure seem to be in good health. I'm quite impressed. Just so that everyone knows, he has a incredible garden going. Not only I peeked out the one in the backyard. What a gorgeous garden.
Well, that's my little garden.
Yeah,
that's just tiny.
Yeah, and then you have how large of a one elsewhere?
It's close to 3 acres out on the edge of Perham. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Would that my garden looked anything like the one in your backyard. So, once you are a farmer, I guess you kind of in the blood.
Enjoy working with the soil.
Yeah, I very much do. That's
yes,
for sure. Yeah.
It's you realize how much you're working with the Lord because He furnishes the soil and the rain and the sunshine
and the germ of life to start with.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that magic germ, of starting from seeds and boy, it's
somebody could explain that someday. It'd be interesting.
It would be very much. You bet.
So tell me, what's it like to be woken up at 10:30 at night and told that you're to be on? They didn't make you get on the train right then. They just told you were going to be the next day or something.
No, that night.
They woke you up at 10:30 at night, out of the no warning, no anything. Just
we'd been on the alert, so we were pretty well packed.
Okay.
And in fact, we were packed pretty close all the time.
Okay.
We were prepared to move, and so we had 1 foot locker and a large duffel bag, and we were on the troop train at midnight and heading south for Harlingen, Texas, which is way down on the Gulf near near Mexico,
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Near Galveston, would that be at all?
Well, no, it would be further east, south and east of Galveston. Okay. Yes, yeah, it's way down in the Rio Grande Valley.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what went through your mind when you actually did get? I mean, sure, I guess you'd been packed up and somewhat prepared, but There must have been some butterflies going on to be taken from where you were to some training that indeed could lead to life-threatening
Oh yes,
assignments.
that's right. Yes, it was a challenge, all right, and we burned up a lot of ammunition
Mm.
training, and and we were and at that time they had trainers that where they had a number of cameras, about 5 cameras, and they would have you setting in you had this 50 caliber machine gun or two, beside you, and it's very much like the kids play with these days, you know, and these cameras would create the illusion, you know, of clouds and planes coming out of those clouds, and we'd have these guns. These guns would they'd record all your hits and all your misses, and when you saw enemy planes coming out of a cloud, you see, and they'd come out high and low in different positions, just like in the natural sky, you know.
Sure.
And so they could, you know, decide just what type of a man you were, whether your reactions were fast or
Sure.
or if you'd be good at gunnery or not. You know?
And if your peripheral vision picked up,
and some of them would wash out, you know, if they were too bad, you know, and but they were. I forget the name of the training bases, but I know they were $250,000 is what they cost, you know, at that time, and that was a lot of money those days.
A lot of money. Yeah.
Yes, and they
just for video games.
That's what it was, a big video game.
That's amazing.
And there was about 4 would be shooting at the time in a row, you know, a row of us, and yes. And they'd be recording the hits and misses of every one of them. And then we flew out over the Gulf of Mexico and did strafing, and then shooting at a target that was towed, you know, and like that.
Sure.
You know. And we used 50 caliber machine guns all the time. And we changed red hot gun barrels when they get too hot. You hold your trigger just a few seconds too long, while the rifling would burn right out. And then the tracers, they'd lob, they'd
spiral out of control.
They were out of control. They weren't. They didn't go straight any longer. They'd lob, you know, when they'd come out of the gun barrel. Okay. So we'd have to change those gun barrels, and we'd have big pads of gunny sacking, and we'd change those hot gun barrels and get a new barrel quick, you know, so that
continue firing.
Yeah, we could continue using those guns.
Now, I'm surprised there wasn't some kind of mechanism built in where it wouldn't allow you to hold it down that long. I mean, like they've it synchronized so you can't shoot your wings off. I'm surprised there wasn't some kind of a timing unit, or maybe that varied depending on temperature or something of the day. Or
I think that it was training so that you'd learn how to fire a burst and then release, you know, a burst and a release.
Okay.
And let those guns not get that hot, you see. But when students are on there, they'd kind of freeze on them.
Okay.
And that was terrible, you know, on the gun.
Okay, yeah, they weren't happy, I'm sure.
No. Yeah. And yes, and we were also trained on deflection shooting. And we were on the back of a 3/4-ton pickup, and we had shotguns with ring sights, big ring sights on these shotguns. And then these targets were thrown at us at 45 and 90-degree angles and 33 degrees, and we had to determine what ring sight we had to use because we had to lead. See, we were moving, and of course your aircraft that you're shooting at is moving. So that's where you have to learn this deflection shooting, so that you lead far enough ahead so that your bullet gets there and meets them.
Meets them.
Yes.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're shooting behind them all the time. If you
Sure.
if you shoot
just
straight at
aimed
them,
at it, it would be gone by the time your bullet got there.
So we had to learn that
They
first.
called it deflection training.
Yes, deflection shooting. Yes, or training. Yes. And this was about half a mile track, and we were moving about 40, 45 miles an hour, and then we'd shoot at these various trap places.
It was kind of like a skeet pole.
Oh yes, it was. And we were shooting at skeet. Really, that's what it was. And yeah, they used a lot of shotgun ammunition there.
No doubt.
I saw a water tank full of ammunition that we got our ammo out of, and there was a number of these just revolving around there, following each other. You know, quite a few trucks were moving.
Spaced far enough apart, one would hope.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they were spaced.
Describe one of the O sights. Did it have something that you would sight on the object itself, and then it would tell you how far ahead to shoot, or what did that do for you, the O sight?
Well, these ring sights.
Or ring sight, I'm sorry.
It depended on what direction whether they were coming straight at you or at 45 or at 33-degree angles, and you had to sort of
make a judgment call
and make
on
a
that?
quick judgment on it, and
Okay.
And so that you would lead with this ring. You know, they had 3 rings on here at least, and then you'd use those for your various.
Interesting.
When you focused in on
Wow.
the sighting.
I wouldn't want to be the rabbit when you're rabbit hunting.
Well, I've never used a shotgun hardly much since. I just never seemed to want to be a hunter.
Right.
I've hunted deer, but shot very few.
Often those that grow prefer the growing, those that hunt prefer the hunting, and a lot of times I've noticed there's not a lot of crossover there.
Yeah, that's right. I enjoy being out and seeing nature more than killing it.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, what all equipment would have been in the turret? You were essentially in the turret right on top of the plane, you said.
Yes.
And
right.
behind the pilot and co-pilot.
Yes.
You had your dual 50 caliber machine guns.
Yes.
What other instruments, or were you just totally, it was the machine gun you were operating and there was no other duty to that? Or?
Well, we were in contact with the whole crew on the plane, and we had big helmets on and ear protectors, of course, and so we could talk between ourselves, and we had a certain language that we'd maybe a boogie coming in at 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock and different positions, you know, so that it would alert the other gunners to from their stations to cover that plane, you know.
Right.
Because some of them would be low, and some I couldn't see, and they'd alert me.
That it might be then coming up from below into your screen of vision.
Yes. Okay. So that I could, when they came into my vision, then I could start firing, you know, at them, you know. But so we had to work as a good coordinate team, you know, to protect that plane, because it was very critical that we protected those bombers, and they were, all our lives depended on it, so it was interesting, but as long as I was never needed, it was yeah.
Rather fortunate, actually.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Now, when you were in Florida, you mentioned that was when you found yourself with more extra time than other places. Why was that?
Well, it was a smaller base, and we weren't working as hard, because we had much fewer men to bake for.
Okay.
But there was just the two of us doing it.
Right.
While in the centralized bake shop, we'd be assigned 10, 12 what they call KPs, kitchen police, and we worked them in all positions,
Okay.
and just gave them direction how to do it, and we supervised it and helped them get started and things like that, and but the basic mixing and preparation, all that, we were responsible for that. Yes.
I noticed earlier when you mentioned the operation in Florida and that there were two of you responsible for running it, I detected somewhat of a smile when you recalled the other man. Were you close friends and good buddies and stuff with the other man that ran the Florida one with you, or was that just something I was imagining there?
We were good friends, but we never continued friendship.
Okay.
No, it wasn't a lasting friendship either.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you have kept in correspondence with for a number of years, or?
That's a sad part of it. I seemed like after I got home here and started college and a family, I lost track of everyone. I just never.
Somewhat natural life had shifted to another
and the man from Chicago, I couldn't find him. I tried to locate him when I was in Chicago.
Yeah, I think
the other sergeant, and he was a pastry sergeant. His dad was a pastry sergeant, pastry man, he was a big man. He a Jewish man, and we had some funny incidents, together. Yeah.
You think of any particular ones that were?
Well, once, some way or another, he got loaded with some what they call crabs, you see, at that time.
Yes.
And they were a certain mite or louse or something.
Right.
And we happened to be bunking together in this. The barracks had, for the supervisors of the mess of these barracks, they always had private rooms at the head near the door, you see. And so he and we were in this private room together, and I was barracks chief, and then he got this dose of crabs, and he had lots of hair on his body, and so he gave me. He went to the hospital and got this blue ointment treatment. And then and of course he couldn't rub his back,
Oh.
He had a big broad back.
Okay.
And so I rubbed his back for him a number of times.
Yeah, to get the ointment on.
We got rid of him too.
Yeah.
Boy, it was a blessing that I never got him.
Oh, you're lucky, because in the same close quarters.
Well, I tell you, I sure did take some good
precautions.
A lot of good showers, I'll tell you, because I sure didn't want them. Boy, that was creepy.
Yeah, that's not.
But that was one amusing thing that happened. I'll never forget that. And he sure depended on me to help him get rid of them.
Right. You were glad to help him get rid of them, I'm
You
sure.
bet. He was my roommate.
That's right.
I wanted to keep that room bug free. Boy. Well, it was amusing too. After we were trained for gunnery, we were down there in not Florida, but South Texas in the barracks, and the men were so bored, because we were waiting for shipping orders.
Sure.
Well, while they were waiting, why someone would go in town and get kind of tanked up, and some would go out with forked sticks hunting rattlesnakes in the mesquite.
Okay.
And so that was one way that they kind of killed time, And one morning we were out cleaning up around the barracks. One man laid his hand right on top of a rattlesnake, but it was cold that morning, and the snake was quite stiff.
Yep, they are.
And he didn't strike.
Wow.
And so we were real careful after that, that where we put our hands. But it was right there underneath the barracks a little bit, and he creeped in there because it was a little warmer probably.
Right.
And boy, it's sure. But then another time, like I say, the boys had come in kind of drunk, and there was a little Texan. He came in. He was ready to beat up everybody that night. And he kicked in the screen door and let in the mosquitoes. And boy, everyone in the barracks was mad then.
I would think so.
But he wanted to fight. And so I told the corporal, I was barracks chief, and I told the corporal, I said, you get to the light switch quick now, and I'm going to have to take care of. And so I had to hit him a couple times and laid him back on his butt, and and he was really ornery, but I had to get the lights out quick because otherwise the KPs, the MPs would be there, to straighten things out, and I didn't want that to happen, because that would get a whole bunch of us in trouble. So, but anyway, I apologized to him the next morning and said I was sorry I had to treat you that way, but you were ornery, and I said, you were asking for it.
Lucky the choice you made rather than the MPs.
Yeah, and he was the most loyal guy after that. I never had a minute's trouble with anyone in that barracks.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, that's it clarified to them that I was ahead.
Right. Yeah, that's what that would say.
But I'd boxed a little in high school, and so I really gave him 2 good punches, and that laid him back, And we got the lights out, and things quieted down quick, and we had no trouble.
Except for the mosquitoes.
Yeah, the mosquitoes, they kept coming.
Oh, boy.
Gee. But I forget what we did to try and keep them out of that barracks. They were bad down there.
That's what I was thinking down
in
there.
the mesquite,
especially bad.
Yeah, near the Gulf of Mexico. But so there was some interesting things would happen once in a while. But, yeah. Yeah, this is the dress uniform, and
okay for light.
this here is the honorable discharge emblem here, and I forget what these 2 emblems here. They had Greek meaning,
Okay, they're attractive.
And then
Okay.
And then here's my Air Force gunnery wings.
From the training that you did with the 50 calibers.
After we passed the. And then this was my good conduct bar here.
Okay.
And this year I think is what they call the I believe it is international medal,
Okay.
for being in and these are just the regular U.S. and the Air Force wings.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then
and
over
this
here.
is the our patch here, Air Force patch here, and my sergeant's emblem, and this is what they call a hash mark. For every 3 years, you get a hash mark.
Okay.
And so I was in, you see, well, less than 5 years.
Right.
Just about 4 3/4 years I served. And,
Okay.
Yes.
Now, was this a particular unit or something of the Air Force, or that's a general?
Yes. This was a certain unit,
Mm-hmm.
and I. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is about all I can tell you about.
Yeah, well, it's
But you can see that it was good, warm clothing.
well, it is just in amazing shape. I mean, look how it's held up. So yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that's the reason the one that
Mm-hmm.
I never had any. Another. You can see how it is on the back. You see. Yeah.
Yep, the tailoring. Well, anything else that comes to mind that you might want to share with us about your military experience?
Well, I think mainly what I can say about it, I was very blessed to enlisted and to have served our country in even if it was stateside all the time. Why I certainly helped feed a lot of men.
That's an important part, and it's important to us to get stories from men that contributed to the war effort from all different angles. Yes.
Yes. That's right. So I guess that's as much as I think about right
Okay.
now.
All right. Well,
that I can.
It's been a pretty interesting little journey you had there through those years. So I'm glad you were willing to share that with us, Ernest.
Well, thank you.